Hello.
Hello, Christian.
As they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. When you look at this picture, what comes to your mind?
Service. Love.
Service.
Love.
Love. Future. Family.
Courage.
Many of us have families. If you're like me, you're a dad. If you're a dad, when I look at this picture, or a mom, when I look at this picture, I'm thinking, Daddy, please don't leave us. And that could mean different things. Daddy, please don't leave us. Or Daddy, when you go, Daddy, when are you coming back? Here's the deal, folks. This soldier, by the way, this was from military.com, courtesy. This soldier cannot honestly answer that question from those two little girls. He cannot honestly, because he doesn't know if he's coming back. He doesn't know if he's coming back because he understands the uncertainty of deployment and the uncertainty of war. One, you don't know when it's going to end. Two, you are not sure if you are coming back. When you don't come back, who is impacted? In the words of one of my friends, at a party of the son that just came back from Iraq in 2005, the daughter is leaving in 2 weeks to Afghanistan. 2 kids, the only 2 kids in the military. I said, tell me, what's your experience been like? Christian, can I be honest with you? Yes, please. And I said, don't tell me, use that phrase because I believe you're honest all the time. I'm going to tell you, Christian, I don't like that war. What? I don't like the Iraqi war. But that's what they chose to do, and as my children, I'm going to support them. Wow. That's a parent. A parent. So I want to tell you guys, folks, when you pray for our men and women in uniform, honestly, deep down, like last Monday. Because these veterans and the men and women in uniform, what we might think are simple deployment, for them means a world of unknown. We have no idea what's going to happen. And with that, I salute sincerely all the veterans. Thank you.
Graphic, something that's somewhat amusing, but I thought for a new assemblywoman, I would tell one of my favorite stories about assemblywomen, and a very famous one. When Sandra Day O'Connor went through Stanford and graduated number 3 in her law class, she got no interview from any of the big law firms in San Francisco or in Los Angeles. She was offered a job as a legal secretary. So she went back to Arizona, practiced law, became a state judge, and then a member of the state senate died, and the governor appointed her to the vacant seat in the state senate, and she did very well, and then ran and won the seat on her own in the next election cycle, and fairly quickly rose through the hierarchy in the Arizona State Senate to become the majority leader of the Senate. And one of the characters she had to deal with, no surprise, was a very recalcitrant, socially conservative, obnoxious member of the Senate, male of course, who was a serious alcoholic. And he was described with a phrase that I thought I would have heard in my Texas background, but I didn't, and it's a wonderful phrase. He was called a 10 o'clock drunk. That's pretty nice, right? That's Molly Ivins' quality, or Ann Richards' quality, 10 o'clock drunk. And inevitably she got into a confrontation with him on the floor of the state Senate one day. And with great outrage, he ranted and ranted, and she finally called him out publicly for being drunk on the floor of the Senate. And he looked at her and said, if I were a man, I'd punch you in the nose. And she said, if you were a man, you could. So there you are. There's one to keep in use, okay? Just put that arrow in your quiver from a wonderful woman whom we all admire. Okay, that was the yarn. Back to pictures next week. Let's see, today's hero. My apologies. Beth? There you go.
Since you've been president, you've done a wonderful job of being on time or early, actually. I can tell it's a worry. I would like to introduce to everybody, very honored to introduce everybody, Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer Kahan. She was elected in 2018 to serve the 16th Assembly District, which includes the communities of Dublin, Lafayette, Livermore, Orinda, Pleasanton, San Ramon, Walnut Creek, Danville, Alamo, and Moraga. So
Big district.
a pretty wide area here. Rebecca is an accomplished attorney, an environmental advocate, community volunteer, law professor, and a mother. A Bay Area native, she's dedicated her career and her personal time to improving our community, solving complex problems, protecting civil rights, and fighting to ensure everyone has the opportunity to succeed. As an attorney, Rebecca specialized in ensuring major corporations complied with environmental laws and regulations by leading internal investigations to improve their environmental practices while maintaining profitability. She also worked with major tech companies on intellectual property cases involving topics including copyright, trademark, and trade secret theft. For the last several years, Rebecca has taught appellate law and legal research and writing at Santa Clara University and Golden Gate University. She's a product of Bay Area Public Schools and is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and Georgetown University Law Center. Rebecca and her husband Darren live in Orinda with their 3 young children. And here she is.
Thank you, Beth. And the only reason I like it when she reads my whole bio is you can tell I'm not as young as I look. Hi, thanks for having me. It's fun to be here today. This is an incredible Rotary, by the way, and I go to a lot of Rotaries in my very large district, and this is the first one with songsters. So that was a fun addition. Yeah. The other thing is, I didn't get to go to Italy. So, I mean, I can tell a lot of people that are traveling to Italy. How fun is that? So happy to be here, happy to be with the Rotary. We are huge supporters of Sunflower Hill, and the work you do to support them and the rest of the community is so crucial. And my gosh, the generosity of this Rotary as I sat here is really phenomenal. And thank you for that tribute to the veterans coming out of Veterans Day. It was a wonderful day to celebrate. Those of you, I'm sure we have people in the room that served, and everybody else who served our country and earned us the freedoms that we're so proud of. I do want to add one thing about Sandra Day O'Connor. So one of my favorite facts about Sandra Day O'Connor is that she stayed home for over a decade taking care of her children and went back. She was an attorney, a trained attorney. She stayed home and raised her family, went back into the practice, and ended up becoming a Supreme Court justice. So women I know who've decided to take a break and stay with their family, I said, well, do you want to be a Supreme Court justice? Because apparently that's still an option. So she's a phenomenal woman with a great past, and obviously someone that we all admire. So you heard a little bit about my background. I grew up in the Bay Area. I'm a Bay Area native. I love this community. I grew up in Silicon Valley. My dad is a physicist, and I grew up in his labs playing with LED lights and the first touchscreen mice. And so representing this area with all of the physicists, which is my dad is, and is really an honor and a privilege. We were just at the lab the other day looking at some of the great work they're doing, one of the labs. But it's really a fun community to represent. So I spent many years, I went to school back east. I came home because once a Californian, always a Californian. And I tried practicing law for 1 year in Washington, D.C., and I just don't move at the same pace they do, let's be honest. So I came back. I started practicing law in San Francisco at a large firm. I fell in love with the practice that I was involved in, which was working with companies who, when they came into my office, were not good environmental actors, and they were there because the regulators had an issue with them, and we worked with them to create compliance programs and get them to be better, to not be harming our water, our air, and when they left my office, they were much better on the environment. And that was a practice I was really proud of. And I also had the opportunity to run my office's pro bono program. And so we had some of the best legal services in the area, and I got to give them away to people who otherwise wouldn't have access to the justice system. And that was a privilege of a lifetime. I increased our work on domestic violence, our work related to homelessness and helping support the homeless out of homelessness. We worked on the Prop 8 cases, fighting for equity in California, and other civil rights issues, and I loved it. So I spent many years there, but then I had 3 children. My son just turned 10, so I've been a mom for a decade. And I decided that the big firm lawyering and being the mom of 3 kids wasn't working. So like Sandra Day O'Connor, I decided to spend more time with my kids. But I taught law school at the same time at night. So I was with my kids during the day, and I taught law school at night for about 8 years. I loved it. I loved my students. I loved the energy of the universities. But I'm a doer. So I always knew I would get back into the practice in some way. And coming out of 2016 as an environmental lawyer, climate change is, I believe, one of the biggest issues facing our generation. And I saw a turn that our nation was taking that I didn't agree with. And I thought that I could take my expertise and my passion and go and represent this community on really ensuring that California continues to lead on the environment. And so I ran to be your assembly member, and I'm almost up to my year anniversary as your assembly member, so it's been almost a year. And it has really been phenomenal to be a part of the legislature, to represent this community, and to do the work that we have done this year. And we've achieved, my team, I cannot take credit for all of it, but the team that I work with and the community activists around here, we've achieved some remarkable things in just a year. So what am I working on in the Capitol? I sit on 4 committees. I'm on the Banking and Finance Committee, the Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee, which obviously plays into the things I care about. We do all the geeky water, soil, air work in the Capitol. And privacy and consumer protections, focused primarily right now on California's privacy law, which will be the first in the nation to really make sure we're protecting your consumer privacy. The work we're doing is making sure we modify that law so that California's businesses can continue to thrive while also protecting your privacy. Those 2 things can go hand in hand, and we're working to make sure it happens. And then I sit on public safety, which oversees the entire California Penal Code, so all criminal matters, including all gun violence prevention, which is an issue that I'm really passionate about. And then I also am the Assistant Speaker Pro Tem. So I have to say, your vote today, I wish all my votes went that smoothly. But I run the assembly floor, so there are 2 of us that run the assembly. And it is an honor. This is a picture from the first day that I presided over the assembly. I preside over all 80 members, and we set the agenda, we run the floor, we make sure that the floor operates smoothly, which I don't know how much you guys read the news about the end of session when we were shut down, but you know, we're an open body. Everything, the public can come into our balconies and watch all the business we do. That isn't always easy when they're not happy with some of the things we're doing. We had there was a lot of debate at the end of session around vaccination laws, and we had some protesters that tried to interrupt session. And this has really been a privilege. I think at a time when we are struggling to have positive political discourse, to disagree and disagree respectfully, and to learn from each other and make good policy despite where you stand, to be able to run the assembly in a way that allows for open dialogue, allows colleagues to speak up when they have an issue, and move forward and do the people's work in a very open and professional manner has been a real honor. And one of the things that upset me at the end of session was that as those protesters were screaming, and we were really torn, do we shut down session or do we continue to operate? And one of the things that was really, really important to me was every single bill we hear affects 40 million people. Those votes we take on the assembly floor, every single one of us takes it very seriously, what we do. And every one of those bills deserves to be heard. And I had a bill up on the day that those protesters were in the balcony yelling. That was a bill I cared deeply about. It was a bill that a mother had brought to me. She was a mother who had been divorced. She was married to an alcoholic, And in their divorce proceedings, she had, the court had ordered them to have a visitation monitor to be with the family, to be with her husband and watch over the visitation of her son, which she thought was a good move until she found out that this person who would take her son from her house to her ex-husband's house had 5 DUIs. He'd been caught 5 times, which you can only imagine. So as a mother, she was panicked. Can you imagine having to put your child in a car with this person? And she found out there was no way to report this person. There was no way to remove this person. These people were not screened in any way. The fingerprinting I get to go volunteer in my children's classroom was more than these folks that were overseeing visitation in our family law system. And so this mother brought this issue to my office, and I thought, this is a no-brainer. These people should be fingerprinted. There should be our agencies should be overseeing this. And obviously, if they've been convicted of sexual predation on children, they should not be eligible for this job. And so we brought that bill. We got, obviously, as you can guess, I would present this bill in committee and everyone would say, this is not already the law. No, this is not already the law. And so it got unanimous bipartisan support, but that bill was being heard that morning. And she was there, the mother that had brought this issue to us, that had been advocating for the children of California. And I was like, her bill is going to be heard and it is going to get a fair and open hearing in the way all bills do. So having that job has been really an honor, and to be in leadership and set the agenda for the state is something that I really enjoyed. Although I have to say, when the speaker called me and said, I'm going to make you the assistant speaker pro tem, I'm like, so you know I'm new, right? But it, you know, I picked it up pretty quickly. It's not so different than a courtroom. I also formed the Select Committee on Women's Reproductive Health. So each of us is empowered to form a select committee that holds hearing, does research, and makes legislative recommendations. We had never in the history of the California legislature had one focused on women's reproductive health, an issue that obviously is really pertinent at this moment. We are seeing a massive decline in the number of reproductive health providers, even in our area. So I represent both Alameda and Contra Costa County. In Contra Costa County, we have 0 Title X providers left. Those are women's health providers that provide complete reproductive care and get support of the federal government in so doing. So making sure that we continue as a state to provide complete and full access to women's health is something that I'm really focused on and that we've spent a lot of time focusing these committee hearings on. I also sit on the Commission for the Status of Girls and Women. We're really focused on equal pay for women. There was a bill that was passed, and we're working on making sure that women are empowered to know what their rights are and how to get equal pay in the workplace. So I carried a legislative package that I really wanted to reflect the values of this community. I think that this is an incredibly, I have the privilege of representing the most well-educated district in the state. It's a very well-educated, very engaged community, and it's an honor to be able to introduce a package that I think really pushed forward the values of this district and the things that people elected me to do. So we did work on children's safety. I talked about the work I did in the family law system, but we did a bill relating to food handlers and training them on deadly food allergens. This came out of a Danville family that lost their daughter due to an accidental exposure to a peanut, and she had a deadly allergy to peanuts, and so we worked with them to change the way restaurant workers understand those allergies so that people with them are safe in restaurants. We also did work on protecting victims of human trafficking. We think of this as an issue that doesn't impact our community, but it does. Both the DAs in Alameda and Contra Costa County tell me this is an issue that they see every day, and it's a battle they're losing. And so I have committed to being their partners and doing everything we can to battle human trafficking. And what they asked of us was to bring a bill, human trafficking victims, when they enter the criminal justice system to bring their perpetrators to justice, are given a caseworker, so that they don't have to keep repeating their story. Because every time they have to repeat their story, you can imagine that re-victimizes them. And that caseworker then carries them through the system until they get justice. Well, it turned out those caseworkers didn't have confidentiality. Attorneys did, but they weren't attorneys. And so the perpetrators were then subpoenaing those conversations and re-victimizing these individuals. So we extended the attorney's privilege to those caseworkers, and now those victims are further protected in the system. So that's something I'm really proud of and was fun to work on with DA O'Valley. We worked on some higher education bills focused on access to higher education, protecting Californians from some of these online for-profit universities that are really preying on our vulnerable students, making sure that they have to disclose if they've been sued for fraud, for example, or kicked out of other states, so that you know what you're buying. We worked on a healthcare bill. We found that when the federal government moved the timeline to get Covered California from mid-January, it used to be January 30th, and they moved it to mid-January, we saw a 25% decline in enrollment, which, when you think about it, isn't super surprising, because everyone's busy with the holidays, right? And so we moved that date back to January 30th, and then we also made sure that if you sign up at the end of January, the plans were saying, well, we're not going to cover people in February. Well, if you're paying, you need to cover them. So we made sure there's no lapse in coverage. If you sign up at the end of January, you will be covered in February. So we have amazing coverage rates in California when it comes to healthcare, but making sure that that system works for all Californians. I did a bill on transportation, an issue that vexes us a lot here, as you all know. And so we did a bill that was really focused on getting projects done quicker and cheaper. So we found that Caltrans was using a system of procurement that allowed their contractors and their builders to work together on highway projects. And it was saving them in 1 year $40 million on transportation projects. That same process was not available to our cities to use on off-highway projects, which seemed ridiculous. It was quicker, it was cheaper, and they were getting the same, better results, arguably. And so we did a bill that brought that. It was started out focused on the Iron Horse Trail extension, which is over Bollinger Canyon and San Ramon, but we made it statewide to say that all cities could use this process to make our transportation dollars go further. And that's something I'm really proud of, because these transportation problems are hard to solve, and we need all of the tools at our disposal. I did quite a few, as I talked about. The environment is a huge passion of mine. We introduced 3 environmental bills. One was focused on the Tesla Park area. Some of you may know here in Livermore, protecting that expansion area, which is a critical wildlife corridor on the Diablo Range, working with East Bay Regional Parks and other folks to save that land. We were very excited to get that to the governor's desk, to give them the state parks the option to sell that land for preservation, and it was vetoed by the governor. But the fight doesn't end. And then I did a bill on electrifying trucking. So we're sitting in a corridor that sees a lot of trucking traffic, as you all know, right, from the port to the 5. And if we're going to hit our clean air goals, trucks have to be a part of that conversation. And so how do we, companies are moving to electric trucks. There are now several on the market that will go 500 miles on a charge. They're 100% clean. They actually have longer life, less maintenance issues, and so companies are incentivized. So we're really looking at the question of how do we set up an infrastructure to support electric trucking? How do we incentivize electric trucking? Because it really will be getting to clean air, and especially in areas like this where you're breathing in a lot of those truck fumes right now. And then we did some clean water work focused on farming and making sure that the Central Valley, which struggles with clean water, we have millions of people living in the Central Valley who can't bathe in their water right now. It's so dirty. And how do we keep it clean? How do we get farmers the resources they need to recharge our groundwater in safe and clean ways, and make sure that we're doing right by California, because water is obviously a very critical resource. So that's a little bit of the legislative package that I carried. I'm really proud to have pulled off most of those bills. As you can see, the environmental ones were the hardest to get through, and that was a learning moment for me. But we don't give up, because climate change, I have 3 little babies that are inheriting this world, so climate change will continue to be at the top of my agenda. We also worked on the budget and making sure we were bringing resources into the district, fire prevention and preparedness, making sure we're funding our fuel breaks and our fire prevention here in the district. It's so important, and we continue to look at areas where we can expand that work. It's obviously important to our safety, to our community, and to our climate. We put away, and I like to point this out because I don't know about you, but when we changed governors, Governor Brown had done such a good job of really putting California in a good place when it came to our rainy day reserves, and with the change in the administration, I had a lot of questions of whether that would continue. And given how good off we were financially, we were able to put another $19 billion into reserves, which I think was a really good move to protect us against the next recession, which we all see coming. We also, I like to highlight this last one, because one of the things that I'm really focused on talking about in the Capitol is something that when I worked with private industry, we would focus on a lot, which is if you spend here and you save there, that's good spending, right? So we asked for, we had these violence intervention programs, and they are programs that stop the cycle of violence at the hospital. These people are there, they stop it, they try to stem it. We've seen that these programs are incredibly effective. Stockton and Oakland have them in place. We've seen a drop of 40% in gun violence in Stockton thanks to these programs. So Massachusetts decided to spend $1 per capita on these programs. And they saw that for every dollar they spent on these programs, they saved $7 in healthcare costs and in public safety costs. So this is smart spending, right? If we can stop the violence, we save money, we should be spending on these programs. So we advocated for, like Massachusetts, that we were spending $10 million for $1 per capita, which would be $40 million in California. We got $30 million, which is good, but we should have spent that extra 10, because with that 10 million, we would have saved 70 million. So we need to continue to have the conversation about how we spend to save, because we do it in the private sector, and we should be doing it in the public sector. There's ways to do it in healthcare, there's ways to do it in the public safety realm, and it's really important to making sure we continue to use our budget wisely. And I think there's more of us having that conversation, which is helpful. We also were able to bring some money to the district, which was really exciting. This morning we just announced a joint effort by Alameda and Contra Costa County to hire full-time officers focused on illegal dumping to stop the tide of illegal dumping that we see throughout our counties. And we were able to bring in $750,000 to fund those programs in both counties. And this is an issue we hear constantly. I just had a community coffee here in Livermore last night, and somebody showed up to talk about the mattresses that are being dumped out on his rural roads. So these officers will be really focused on that and figuring out how as a state we can stop it, because it doesn't help when our communities are littered. Obviously, it's a quality of life issue. It's also an environmental issue. People are dumping toxic substances near our waterways, and we need to really get to the bottom of how we solve this problem. And I'm excited about that partnership with the DAs and the Sheriff's Office. We also did a couple of parks. I'm a big believer in getting our children out off their screens and out into the environment, like when I was a kid, to learn to love the environment. And so we were able to do 2 All Abilities playgrounds, one here in the Tri-Valley in Dublin and one in Lafayette, which we're really excited. I think will open up some more outdoor opportunities for our young folks. And then we also worked with East Bay Regional Parks on a really exciting restoration project that is part of Sibley Regional Park, which will take what was formerly a construction zone and turn it into a park with camping, and there is a waterway that was completely cemented over that they're going to reopen. The fish currently swim up to it and get stuck, and those fish will now be able to continue to move up the waterway. So it's an exciting project. But actually, one of the things I'm most excited about this project is that they are going to do this restoration and film it and create an educational program for kids on how we can turn back the clock on environmental destruction. And I love this because I think it gives hope. I think that sometimes when I talk to our youth about climate change, they just want to throw their hands up. They're scared and they don't know what to do. And there are projects like this where we can actually restore our environment and do better and teach kids about what we can do to improve our environment, even where we've done things that aren't so positive. So that's a little bit of the work we're doing. Happy to answer any questions. I hope I left enough time for questions, because I usually like to talk more about what you want to talk about than what I want to talk about. So I will turn it over to you. No mic passers. Okay.
I have a question about your slide about the women's health, reproductive health, and that there's no Title X providers left in the Tri-Valley.
Contra Costa County.
Contra
yes,
Costa.
actually, Alameda County is doing better than Contra Costa
okay.
County.
And can you explain what's happened there?
Yeah, so when the gag order came out from the federal government, our Title X providers that were giving women full scope of reproductive choices would no longer have been able to discuss the right to abortion. And because of the way the rules are set up, they actually have to have physical separation between anyone talking about that and any other health care that's provided. And so all of Contra Costa's providers backed out of Title X. And those clinics are still open, they are still operating, which is good news, but they have lost a significant portion of their budget. And those clinics do full healthcare services, cancer screenings, the things that we really need our women to have access to. And so our hearing was focused really on what is the gap that is being left. And we're blessed here with amazing supportive communities. Those clinics are, heavily supported by our communities, as you all know. When we think about California as a whole, we know that it will leave deserts of care for women in the Central Valley, potentially in other places. And so we are looking statewide at how to make sure women continue to get the care they need so that we don't see women having bad outcomes.
This is a rather local question. A lot of us here were involved with the Tesla Park thing. And so 1086 got vetoed. I was wondering what's next.
That's a good question. Yeah, so for those of you that don't know the Tesla Park history, it is a beautiful piece of open space contiguous with Carnegie Recreational Vehicle Area. The Carnegie wants to expand their off-road vehicle usage, and there is a coalition of environmental groups and park groups that really want to save that land, because if you look at the Diablo Range, it's a pinch point for wildlife and for other things. It also has some pretty incredible Native American sites that would be destroyed by this use. And so I was sitting actually on the out on the porch the last night of session when we got into the governor's office with Assemblymember Joan Buchanan's former chief of staff. She said, we were working on this when Joan Buchanan was the assembly member. So this is a long time in the making, trying to protect this land. We were very excited to get it to the governor. We believed it was a huge step in the right direction. Although the bill was not that big of a deal, it didn't do anything but give state parks the right to sell the land. Didn't say they had to sell the land, just that they could if they wanted to. So we were very surprised by the veto, because the governor had the power as the governor to prevent the sale even if the law was passed, but he chose to veto it. His veto message was fairly confusing, if you ask me. It didn't necessarily address what the bill did as far as I'm concerned. But we are where we are. The law is vetoed. But the fight continues. As far as I'm concerned, it is those critical wildlife corridors need to be protected. And we see that this off-road vehicle use, although perhaps appropriate in some places, is not appropriate in these critical wildlife corridors where we know the wildlife will not go if the folks are there driving their off-road vehicles. And so we will continue to protect it. We are bringing what is next is we are working with the agency. As we got the sense that we were going to get the veto, we reached out to the head of state parks and the Secretary of Natural Resources who oversees state parks. The Secretary of Natural Resources didn't seem to be so aware of the issue. He's new under Governor Newsom. And so we have invited him out. He is coming out. He's going to tour Tesla Park with us. We are going to show him what it is we're trying to protect. We're really excited about that. We're going to do that in conjunction with East Bay Regional Parks and some other local groups, and really start to get him on board, because I think that's crucial. What I would like to believe, my optimistic self, when I read the veto message said they wanted to protect the park for use by all Californians, which I read to mean he didn't want it sold. So it was going to be sold. The possibility was it would be sold to a land trust for preservation. Maybe so my hope is that we can save it as a state park, but not for off-road vehicle use, and that it would be a park that would be protected. Maybe that's the next avenue. But I'm not giving up, because I really do think it is a critical piece of land.
Any update on the self-deduction creativity that the Californians were trying to personify state taxes as
Wait, can you
charities?
repeat that? I'm sorry.
The self-deduction cap that the federal government made of 10,000 limit. There were some discussions in the Californian state that you'd be created to make state tax a charitable deduction. Any latest on that?
Yeah, so I have not heard anything about that, but it's a good question. And we should look into it, because it does affect our charities pretty significantly. So, yeah, we did there was a tax conformity bill this year, and it didn't address that. So we will follow up. I don't sit on Rev and Tax, which is the committee that deals with that, but we can look into it. Anybody else? Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. This is such a stressful job, because it's like I'm playing favorites among my constituents.
Full ticket.
Thanks, Sheila.
I don't know who you
Good read ticket.
are. Okay.
Last three digits usually do it.
4, 3, 9. 4 through 9. Nobody? 4 through 9.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it takes a while.
Oh! Is it